Categories of typography. Now, I've broken this down to there are two ways to look at to categorize them in a broad way, broadly in a very very broad way, and we can approach this based on style. If it's based on style, so we have two. So the typography can either be functional or expressive. Now, the for functional typography, emphasis is on clear spelling and intended information to be properly communicated. Whereas in expressive, it means we are taking typography as not just letters that are coming together for us to form words, right? So that we will form spelling. Rather, we are now approaching each of them as an art, right? That we can now use as a visual element to pass our message across. So I said here, emphasis is on the visual meaning over orthography. That is the conventional meaning derived from spelling. Let's say I have A, B, C. Once I bring A, B, C, once you see A, you see B, you see C, you know that okay, there is a conventional meaning in the English word view of what A mean, what B mean. But A can now be used to do some expression of art. So in that now, A loses the conventional meaning we have of A. So A can now stand for maybe a house. So in that regard now, we are being expressive and not functional. So these are examples of functional typography we can see. It's being used in advertising here. These are social media. Let's say this person wants to sell the chair, right? So this is 50% off. So the major thing here is communication. Communication is what is driving the design here. You can see this is a newspaper. Communication is a key theme. As different from this, where all the letters are coming together to form an idea, to form an art, to form an expression of art. So you can find instead of we just having a normal D, right? The D has now been converted into a bulb, and the I there is now the butt of is now the bottom part of a light bulb. So you can also see in the scissors. So these are examples of expressive typography as opposed to the former one, which was communication was driving it as different from it being an art expression of art. Categories of typography based on typeface. Now, based on typeface, we have many people can approach this in different way, but for me, I've done this in five categories. One is the serif, two the sans serif, three script, four monospace, and five decorative. Serif is further broken down into subcategory, and one of them is old style. The old style is characterized by number one, just like we have there, we have diagonal stress. That is, we have the thin parts are on the diagonal rather than horizontal or vertical axis. We have we have bracketed serif, as you can find in the number two there being highlighted, where there is curve attaching the stem and head. We have minimal contrast. There is minimal contrast happening just like the place we highlighted as number three there. There is where we highlighted as number four, you can find what we have as wedged edge serif. Also, just like we have angle head serif, just as you can find there, the L, the top of the L is angular. And yeah, example of this is Adobe, Jason, Geramon, and Gaudi Old Style. So these are example of the fonts. You can search, look for this out in. You can Google them to see to have more information. Then the next subcategory of serif is transitional, and as you can find in number one, usually vertical stroke. Number two, as we highlighted, number two, there's vertical stress, more pronounced contrast than in old style design. There is oblique and bracketed serif, just like you can see in the number four. So example of these are Baskerville, Baskerville and Perpetua. Then the next subcategory of serif is modern. In modern, modern serifs, we have little or no bracketing on the serifs. We have vertical axis on curved strokes. We have dramatic contrast between thick and thin strokes, and there is ball-shaped stroke terminals. And a very classic example of this and a very renowned serif is the Didots and the Bodni. Classic example of this modern serif is Didot and Bodoni. Then the next subcategory of serif is slab serif. So we have heavy serif with very little or no bracketing. There is virtually no contrast in stroke width. Example of this is Monsieur Slab, Rockwell, American typewriter. Then the next subcategory of serif is glyphic. So glyphic emulates in this place now, highlighted as number one, it emulates lapidary inscription rather than pen drawn text. Have minimal stroke, weight, and contrast. Use triangular serif shapes. So example of fonts of these fonts are Abatos, Cartier Book, and New Text. Now we move to the sans serif category, and the first one we'll be taking a look at is the grotesque. So a very key feature of this grotesque is bold uppercase, as highlighted as you can see in the number one. Minimal contrast on the stroke. Older version include minimal contrast on the stroke. Some of these curves, as highlighted in number three, some of these curves were more square. There is double story in the lowercase g. Example of grotesque sans serif are Franklin Gothic and New Gothic. Sans serif neo grotesque, that is after grotesque. This is a subcategory for the sans serif. So the key characteristics is that the place now highlighted as number one, we find it being more legible. The place highlighted as number two, we find it being plainer. So example of this, the fonts that falls into this category are Helvetica, Area, and Universe. Then the next subcategory in the sans serif is a geometry. The place highlighted as number one, we have round, round hole, as you can see, as highlighted number one. The place we highlight as number two, that is the E, are based on single geometry shape. The places highlighted as number three have no contrast between stroke. And a very good example of this is Futura and Avenir. This other subcategory of sans serif is what we call humanistic. Humanistic, based on what we highlight, as you can see, what we highlight in number one, are based on proportional and Roman style capital. Now all the places highlighted as number two. Now all the places highlighted as number two were created to be more legible. Now in the number three, have more contrast than the other serif. Then the place highlighted number 4, we have a calligraphic influence. An example of this, of the fonts that fall into this category, this subcategory, are Guy Sans, Verdana, and Lucida Grande. For the script category, we have subcategory called formal. Now, for formal, we have flowery loops and flourish. We have letter form that are generally connected. Examples are Bicam script, snare round hand, Chrysler script. In the next category that falls under the script, we call casual. In the casual script, we have, as highlighted in number 1, we have a brush-like appearance with strong stroke. With the places highlighted number 2, we have letter form that are sometimes connected. And examples of fonts that fall into this category are brush script, Bianca, and mahogany. Bianca and mahogany script. In the script subcategory, we also have calligraphic. Now, in the places highlighted as number 1, we find that it emulates hand-lettered calligraphy. Then the places highlighted as number 2 generally have high contrast. That is, the G and the H generally have high contrast. An example of this of fonts that fall into this category are Mistral, Vivaldi, then Bellerino. Black letter is also one of the subcategory under script. Now, in the place highlighted as number 1, you find it being very formal, being very prim, being very proper. And in the number that is the K, based on handwritten calligraphy. It has this feel of handwritten calligraphy as opposed to the B that is very, very formal and very much detail as compared to the K. The number 3 have strong contrast on strokes. An example of the fonts that fall into this category are Gaudi text, Mammoth, and Graves of Old English. Then after this, we have handwritten as the subcategory for script. Handwritten, the place highlighted as that's the age. They usually have this tendency of looking casual, and the place highlighted that number 2, we find them being mimic the modern handwriting. Examples are block script, Pacifico, Cadaville cursive. Then monospace, also called fixed pitch, fixed width, or non-proportional font, is a font whose letters and characters each occupy the same amount of horizontal space. That is, every letter takes up the same amount of horizontal space and on the page of the screen. Now, it's worthy to know that there are serif and sans serif varieties of monospace. And examples of fonts that fall into this category are Courier New, Consolas, Source Code Promo. And the next category is what we call display. Display typeface vary widely in their appearance and include both practical and novelty fonts. They are suitable for headlines and titles. And a very good fonts that fall into this category. Fonts that fall into these categories are Broadway, Copper Black, and Calls.